Hey, it's the Real Estate G. Welcome back to the Birddog Bootstrap Blueprint. So right now we're getting into the seller lead sheet. So now that you've gone through the who do you know script, you got some momentum going. You put some fillers out there. You planted some seeds. Now it's time to start nurturing those seeds. You got to have some names. Got to have some names and numbers, and we're gonna make some phone calls, right, to follow up on some of these deals or some of these leads. I'll say leads. They're not a deal until we start analyzing them and figuring out where our offer is going to be and making an offer. So let's get into it. Let me pull up the stock and then we'll get this into it. Okay. So the seller lead sheet. All right. So Birddog Factory gmail.com. So a lot of times you have your business information there. Best number to reach you, email, website, that type of thing. It's all your personal branding, right? So anytime you're talking to somebody moving forward, I want you to think in this order in terms of gathering information. What's the address? Always get the property address first. Why? Because you can find out everything else about a property with the address. Like who owns it, who's on title, best person to contact, what's the shit, like all of that. You can do some research, but you got to get the address. So you start with the property address, you write down the date, you write down the lead source, who do you know script, Facebook, that type of networking event, that type of thing. Contact person. Contact person may not necessarily be the homeowner, could be a real estate agent, could be the cousin, the brother, mother, uncle, friend. Contact person, phone number. Owner on title. That is key. You want to have an owner on title information. You want to know who that is because that's ultimately the decision maker. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time negotiating with somebody that's not in a position to make a decision. Now, you can build rapport with people that aren't necessarily in the position to make a decision, like influencers, but you really want to know at the end of the day who you're presenting your offer to, because that's how you're going to get the contract and that's how you're going to position yourself to make money on the deal. So owner of contact, who's the mortgage with, you want to get their name, number, email. So again, let me go over the order of this section real quick. Address first, contact person, phone number, right? Who's on title? They have a work number, cool. They have a home number, cool. They have an email, cool, get that. Who's on the mortgage? Or who's the mortgage with? Is it Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whoever, Chase, whatever, whatever mortgage company. Then here's some of the questions. Do you currently live in the home? Yes or no? That's important because that's going to help you understand their motivation. If they live in the home, then that means that there's some things that they got to figure out as they transition out of the home, like where they're going, where they're going to live, whether they're renting or buying, like those things, right? If they already out of the home, then you want to understand, how long they've been out of the home, what had to move out of the house, and it's actually good if they're not in the home because then that opens the door to some very creative strategies where you can then, gain access to the property, gain control of the property as you navigate your offer and your agreement. How long, style of the home, square footage, all that stuff you can get from having an address. So I don't necessarily ask these questions unless I feel like I need to create some type of icebreaker, because a person will give you some basic information like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, do you have a deck? Do you have a pool? Do you know when the property was built? Do you know the lot size? Is there a garage? Do you have a homeowners association? You don't always have to ask these questions. but there are simple buffer questions or icebreaker questions that you can ask to make the person feel more comfortable on the line. Has anything been recently upgraded? You know, that's a good question. If there's yes, how soon? What did you do? Do you remember what it cost you? Those types of questions, because that's going to give you some idea of the general condition of the property, where it's good, fair, or bad. Structured or mechanical. Are you experiencing any structural or mechanical issues? Any water issues? Any roof, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, pool, landscape, seen any termites? Like sometimes I get into these questions over the phone. Most times I wait till I get to the property to inspect these different things. It all depends on the flow of the conversation. For me, what I'm listening more for is the motivation of the seller. I want to understand what they're going through, what's the scenario that they're dealing with. I'm not as concerned about the house, because all of these things about the house I can already resolve through my construction budget. Like, I don't get inspections a lot of the time by hired home inspectors, because when I'm going into it, I already know that I'm going to put in some money for the property to do some renovations. And so what I'm doing is more checking to make sure, that there's no major things that I have to consider. And say it needs a foundation, or it needs new plumbing, or it needs new HVAC, or a new roof, or anything like that. Those aren't deterrents for me. I just need to be aware of it so that I can account for it in my offer. And so then when I present my offer, you know, hey, I would love to give you what you're asking. The reason why I'm not in a position to do that is because I have to account for the new foundation. I need to account for the new septic system. I need to account for the new roof. And these aren't things that I'm doing myself. I have to hire professionals. There's a process that has to take place, and it can be expensive. If these weren't issues that you had to deal with, I would probably suggest that you hire a real estate agent, because you'd likely be able to get a little bit more money. But the condition of your property is going to really require somebody like myself that's prepared to deal with some of these issues. That's a conversation that you could have potentially with this homeowner. I'm not the guy that comes to the house pointing out all the problems and basically telling them that their house is a piece of crap. I'm the person that's educating them on the process. There's different types of buyers. There's retail buyers, and then there's you know um, investor buyers, and then there's landlord buyers or rehabbers. All these different types of buyers buy different types of properties in different conditions. And if your condition is not up to standard, then you can't expect a retail price when the property needs some renovation, major renovation or otherwise. You're going to need an investor buyer, and an investor buyer is going to be, they're going to need to make a profit. They're going to need to be able to make a profit if they're going to take on this deal. And they're not going to be able to get conventional financing. They're going to have to deal with hard money or pay cash. And sometimes that's kind of the same thing. Um, and so, do you have a realtor? If so, what's their phone number? When does the listing expire? Okay, now we're getting into the motivation, right? What is the particular reason you are looking to sell the house at this time? How quickly are you looking to sell? How have you considered what you're going to do with the property if it doesn't sell? That's powerful. You know, have you, Mr. Seller, have you considered what you're going to do with the property if it doesn't sell? Like, that's a question that if you're haggling on price, they don't want to sell it any cheaper. You can't really pay them much more. You know, hey, see, we're at the impasse. Mr. Seller, have you considered what you're going to do if you don't sell? Out of curiosity. Okay, then you got mortgage information. What do you currently owe on the property? Are there any liens or in the mortgage? Are you currently on a payment? Um, are you current on your payments, or how many months behind? If it's months behind, what's the amount? You have any back taxes, any other liens on the property? What are your monthly payments? Does that include taxes and insurance? Like, are they escrowed? 9 out of 10 times, the taxes and insurance are in the mortgage payment. So what does that mean? So if you ever go to a tax sale, tax deeds, tax auctions, they've been very popular lately. If you go to a tax sale, it's likely that they're behind on their mortgage as well. Because if they're delinquent on their taxes, then they haven't made a mortgage payment either. And if they don't have a mortgage, then that's a good situation, because then, you know, taxes are typically a fraction of the value of the property in relationship to, in comparison to like a mortgage. So you got a better chance of getting a deal because you got a bigger spread on it. Okay. What are monthly payments, interest rates? Do you have any second mortgages? Is it adjustable? Do you have any prepayment penalties? The mortgage company one, company two. Okay. Now, let's go into this second section. Price. Always frame the price. What does that mean? When you present your price, you want to frame it. You don't want to just spit out. You don't want to just spit out a. You don't want to just spit out. You don't want to just spit out a. Okay. So now we're going to get into price. Always frame the price. If I could make you a cash offer and close on your timeline, what would be the bottom line price? So that's the frame. This is the frame. If I could make you a cash offer, so you're presenting, if I could do this, not saying that I could, but if I could make you a cash offer and close on your timeline, what would be your bottom line price? Or what would be the best you could do? How flexible is that price as a follow up? How did you establish that number? That is the money making question. How did you establish that number? How did you come up with that number? I always ask that question. They ask, hey, I want this amount of money for the house. Okay, how did you come up with that number? Why is that important to understand? Because when you know how they came up with the number, then you could reverse engineer or compare apples to apples. Sometimes, oh, I came up with this number because it's going to need, my neighbor down the street sold their house for this and my house is better. Or I did this type of work, and, or it's just a number of different ways that when they lay out how they came up with the number, oh, I used the comps. Okay, so what comps did you use? If I could use those same comps, I will, you know. Okay, now this section, subject to. So if you don't know, subject to is another strategy that you can use. It's a creative acquisition strategy, and generally speaking, it's referred to uh, um, when you hear subject to. It's typically referencing that you're buying a property subject to the seller leaving the mortgage in place. But that's not necessarily what it means. Fundamentally, it just means that my offer is subject to a set of conditions. Okay. So a lot of times when you're in good financing, when good financing is in place, like you currently have, I can make a higher offer by taking over responsibility for your existing payments on your mortgage. See, that's how you deliver that conversation. But what you're doing is you're saying you're taking over responsibility for the existing payments. That's not assuming the payments. You're not assuming the mortgage. The assumption of mortgages is a thing that exists, but this is not what you're doing. You're taking responsibility for the existing payments on the mortgage, or you're assuming the payments on the mortgage, assuming responsibility for the payments on the mortgage, not assuming the mortgage. It's two different things. Is that something that you would be interested in discussing? They're probably not going to understand it. And so you're going to have to kind of have that conversation, educate them on the pros and cons. Um, you can see this, you can see this strategy happen a lot with pre-foreclosures because they have a mortgage on the property, and prior to the current market, a lot of times they didn't have any equity. And so sometimes when the payment was affordable, it might make sense to catch up the mortgage and then assume the payments on a mortgage moving forward, and take possession of property. And now with like strategies like Airbnb, it makes sense to do those types of strategies, assume those on those upside down types of properties because you can cash flow it. And so, there's certain deals that you're not going to be able to flip it and make a lot of equity, but you'll be able to cash flow it over time, and it makes the deal make sense. That's why subject to is a strategy that works. And so as an investor, you're going to want to understand these different strategies and then understand the conditions in which you want to use and apply the different strategies to where they make sense. Now, here's another concept that you want to understand in relationship to subject to or seller financing. The lease option is another strategy. And I use the lease option when I'm confronted with a subject to or a seller financing deal that they have concerns about changing title. So that's when I would use the lease option strategy because it gives me control over the property versus ownership. And it sometimes is better to have control versus ownership. And so other people involved in the decision making. Now you're coming to the close. You want to understand if there are other people involved in making decision making. Have you discussed selling your home with anybody else? Is there any competition? Are you talking to anybody? Will they be shopping my offer? That type of thing. Or is there anybody helping them with the problem? Do they have an aunt or cousin or sister that's a real estate agent? I currently have a offer. I currently have other offers out on a few different properties. If I make an offer that you are, if I make an offer that you like, would you be prepared to make a decision today? So I got a couple, like this is not my only deal going on. I got a couple other deals that I'm working on, a couple other offers out there. If I was prepared to make an offer today, you know, that you like, would you be prepared to make a decision today? Like basically, are you willing to sign this contract that I brought with me? If we can come to an agreement on a price. uh, Internal office information. So that's some internal office information. You're going to get the ARV, understand the as is value, come up with the rehab budget, those types of things, you know, um, appointment time, those types of things. So this is the seller lead sheet. Yeah, just go through this, practice this. I would suggest you practice this, get comfortable with it, get comfortable with the different sections. If you have any questions on the, different sections, shoot me a message, and we'll do some Q&A, and we'll take it from there. Hope this was helpful. Have a great day.